morning, guys. This is Nick Sherritt, and I'm here with the third installment of the N-scale build. We've kind of got the nuts and bolts of the layout done. It's painted the tracks down and painted. The layout itself has the base colors down. So for this next step, I was going to do the ballasting. And for this project, I'm going to use fine brown ballast, and I'm going to mix it together with fine buff ballast. Now, I even use fine ballast for my HO stuff as well. I've used the medium stuff a couple of times. I think it's a little too bulky even for HO. So fine for HO and N would be my recommendation. So the first thing we're going to do is get a clean mixing container and mix these two ballasts together, and we want to make sure we shake it up good and get a good consistency before we apply it to the layout. There are many different methods to ballasting. Everybody probably has their own way that they do it. I've tried a couple of different methods. The one method that I wasn't real impressed with was just laying the ballast down and just hosing it with the water and glue mix. I just think it gets kind of messy and everything gets wet. So I'm gonna do a little different method on this layout. I'm just going to take this brush and some Elmer's glue, and I'm going to go around the edges and glue it just a section at a time, and then I'll sprinkle the ballast on the sides. A little goes a long way with this glue. You can see over on the siding I actually got a little bit more glue down onto the ground level than I wanted to, and it kind of came away from the sides of the track, which is okay in some spots. It's not going to be perfect everywhere, but I kind of learned as I went along here that it's probably best to just try to apply it right directly to the sides of the easy track, and it worked out pretty well once I got that ironed out. Anytime you're ballasting around the switch, you want to be pretty careful. It's okay to get ballast in there. You can brush it out if there's too much, but you don't want to get anywhere near that switch with glue for obvious reasons. But what I typically do is just sprinkle a little bit of ballast in there, just enough that it kind of covers the mechanics of it there, and then brush it out so that it's still functional. Now that we've got all the ballast down, we'll just wait on that to dry, and then we'll take our little mini vacuum and we'll vacuum up everything that's not glued down. Now, while we're waiting on that ballast to dry so that we can get our sweeper out and vacuum off the excess, we're going to take a look at this little water tower that I picked up at Hobbyland. This was on the clearance bin. It's just a Plasticsville, and I'm going to take my weathering chalk here and try to weather this up a little bit. I like this kit. I picked it up a couple years ago. It's got gray, light gray, rust, and black, and really that kind of covers most of the basis of what you know when you're looking at weathering something. And also these pins, these things are worth their weight in gold. A friend of mine showed them to me a couple years back, and I've used them ever since. The Testers Rail Brown, and like the aged concrete. This is a couple of projects I've used them on previously. Some soot on the roof there from the exhaust, and here's a boxcar, Walther's boxcar I used the pins on and in conjunction with the chalk. So here I'm just going to start off with, this is the weathered black, just to try to knock the shine off. Anytime you get any of these little kits like this, they're always really shiny, and you really want to knock that down and just take away all of that shine. So I've applied that to the water tower, and now I'm using an earth color to kind of knock the shine off of the roof, and then adding in some weathered black and pulling it down so it fills in the cracks of the shingles. There's some textured shingles there. I didn't quite get enough the first time, so I decided to kind of blot it in a little bit, and it just kind of gives it a nice weathered look, like it's been sitting there unused for a couple of years. So this is after I've added some rust color to the roof, and anything that was like black that was metal, looked kind of metal, I added the rust color, and then used the soot black just to try to give it a little more aged look. And then anytime I do chalk, I'll hit it with some dull coat just to kind of adhere it, keep the chalk on there, but don't use too much because it will run off. And then we're sweeping up the extra ballast there. Okay, now we've got all of our excess ballast off of the perimeter. We're going to start filling in between the gauge, and we'll just do that the same way as we did before with the spoon, but then I'll take a dropper with some glue and water mix to glue it in there. So here I'm just using some Elmer's glue, and do like a 50-50 mix with water, just grab it out of the faucet. And the Ajax is just so that when you apply the glue, you just put a drop or two in there so your ballast doesn't float away whenever you are using that dropper. Now here I'm just hitting some spots that didn't get quite enough glue. You want this to be as even as possible, just to try to make it as solid as possible. You don't want weak sections that could pop out when you move the layout around. So that's it for this time. Next time we'll be looking at doing some more scenery and some Woodland Scenics Easy Water.